One of the most significant issues when shooting landscapes with wide-angle lenses is how small the background becomes due to the barrel distortion on these lenses. For many photographers just starting out their journey into landscape photography, there's a secret way to combat this. However, this method seems controversial, especially if you only capture the raw beauty as the camera sees it, not necessarily as you see it. In this instance, it's called perspective or focal blending. By combining two focal lengths in one image, we can correct the barrel distortion of wide-angle lenses and produce an image closer to what a landscape represents to the human eye. I've recently been looking back at some of my older landscape photos, and while looking through some of them, I wish I applied this technique rather than going for the straight out of camera look. While I firmly believe in shooting landscapes the way my eyes see them, sometimes it feels like the camera simply cannot capture them that way. And aside from the dynamic range limitation, our brain has a better perspective correction than our lenses, and of course Photoshop. So therefore, you have to apply some often questionable techniques. Whether you're shooting on a black sand beach in Iceland or the red dunes of Namibia, you'll soon notice your background appearing much smaller than it is when using a wide-angle lens such as a 16-35mm. However, zoom into 35mm and you'll find those mountains in the distance appear much closer to what you see with your own eyes. So what if you combine the foreground shot at 16mm and the background at 35mm? Suddenly, your image becomes a more faithful representation of what you see in real life. So to test this technique, I jumped in the car and headed down to South Wales to see whether focal blending can be done realistically, or whether it pushes the boundaries of pure landscape photography too far. Right, so I've returned from Wales and we've got this shot on screen. It's this beautiful coastline, almost prehistoric looking coastline in southern Wales, and I've got two shots loaded up in Camera Raw. So one image is quite a close-up of the cliff, while the other one is much further away. Now if we look at the metadata, you can see I've shot this at 16mm, while the other one I've zoomed in slightly using the 16-35, and that's at 24mm. The 24mm perspective just gave me a little bit more realism in terms of how close those cliffs really were. We're going to now combine the very wide-angle lens shot with the 24mm shot, so combining this, taking the 16 and the 24 and combining both of those. However, we're only going to keep the foreground of the 16mm and replace the background of the cliff with the 24mm. That way you get a more accurate depiction of what the scene actually looked like, because on the 16mm, if I go back to that, while it looks fine on the image itself, in reality the cliffs were actually more sort of like this. They appeared a lot closer and a lot larger. I wanted to bring that over into the actual photograph itself as well. Now in these two images, I've already applied all my raw settings. So I've got all my exposure settings dialed in and did a bit of color grading, did a bit of dodging and burning. We're ready to combine these two images. Now, if you want to have a look at simple raw processing of adding a bit of contrast using masks, those sorts of things, be sure to check out the video linked above. In that video, I do a complete rundown of my way of editing landscape photos by using masks and doing correct exposures, dodging and burning, as I said, and adding some color grade to it as well. For now, we're going to stick to focal or perspective blending in this. So I'm just going to load these two up in Photoshop. So I'm going to select both of them in Adobe Camera Raw, keep Shift in, and make sure it says open objects on the bottom there. I'm just going to click on that. It's going to open up Photoshop for us. Okay, so we've got our photos opened up in Photoshop, and we're now going to take the one image and drag it across to the other one. Hold Shift, that way it sort of positions it perfectly. And we've now got two layers, two smart objects as well. So if we want to do any raw changes to this before we do the whole combination of focal lengths, we can do that. So we're trying to edit in a non-destructive way here. So nothing's baked in, anything can be changed at any point in time throughout the process. If I hide this top layer, you can see we've got the 24mm layer underneath. So I'm just going to rename this as the 16mm, and the bottom layer I'm going to do 24mm. That way I know which one is the closer perspective and which one is the wide perspective. I'm going to drop my 16mm at the bottom, keep it there. Turn that back on, and I'm going to go to my 24mm layer, the one that's a bit more of a close-up on the cliffs, and I'm going to create a layer mask. Now, before we continue on this, one important thing to note with perspective or focal length blending is that it generally works better when you've got a straight, clear horizon line. You can do perspective blending on more complex images containing trees and things like that, things that break up the horizon quite a bit. But of course, you've got to also then take into account that it's going to take longer in Photoshop to mask out these individual elements, especially when dealing with things like trees that break up the horizon line. When you're dealing with an image like this on screen and you've only got a straight horizon line, it's a very clear-cut mask that you're going to have to use. So with my 24mm layer selected, I've got my mask there. I'm going to select my brush tool by pressing B. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to just select a soft round brush, nothing too fancy. I'm going to increase the hardness slightly, just around there. And I'm going to make sure that the black layer is selected. So I'm just going to click on that little icon because black reveals and the white hides it. So let's set up the opacity and the flow to 100% for now. And I'm just going to paint away the bottom bit of this layer. Now already you can see this coming to fruition. You can already see what I'm trying to achieve here, but you have to be careful and have a look at the details, especially if you're shooting on a high megapixel camera, something medium format, or in this case, like me, with the Canon R5C, which is a 45 megapixel sensor. There's a lot of details that you can easily pick up, and you can see when masks go bad. Anyway, carrying on, I'm going to now just mask in all the way. Just gonna make this brush a little bit harder. I'm just pressing Alt, holding in Alt and right mouse button and moving up and down with my mouse. That way I can change the hardness on the fly. And I'm going to press left press over there, and I'm going to hold in Shift. And that's kind of what I want to go for, but now we're getting these weird little ridges, like almost like little speed bumps. I'm going to undo that, Control Z. I'm going to go to my brush settings, and I'm going to choose this spacing. I'm going to drag the spacing down to 1%, because all the spacing does is it actually spaces out the brush strokes, as you can see there. So we want no spacing on this at all. So I'm going to do that again. with the spacing set to 1%, and I'm just going to go all the way, and now we've got a nice straight line. I'm going to do that again all the way to there and there, just cutting underneath this little ridge line here, all the way over. And luckily with these rocks you can cheat it a little bit, they seem to blend in quite nicely. We are going to refine the mask in just a moment. If you want to have a better detailed look of your mask and where you've used the mask, simply press Alt, hold in Alt and press on your mask. Now we've got a nice detailed look, so if I've missed anything, you can see exactly where. So if I had a white spot like that, I can simply just mask that out. Alright, to go back to normal view, you just press Alt, hold in Alt and press on the mask again and you're back. So now we just want to go and refine our mask, because it's not quite like you can, if you zoom in here you can see that doesn't look right. There's a bit of rock that's protruding underneath the image there. So I'm going to soften up my brush a little bit, and I'm just going to just brush back and just keep on refining it. And let's bring down the opacity and the flow a little bit. Just blend in those details really. And this is kind of where the controversy comes in, because it's not 100% as depicted in real life. You have to do a bit of trickery here, unfortunately. But in the overall sort of image, it does look a bit more realistic, a little bit more lifelike, the way you would actually see it in real life. So yeah, it's debatable. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would you use this technique, or would you rather just stick to one lens and just shoot it that way? So this can go on. We can refine a little bit more here on the rocks as well. Let's just bring down the opacity again and the flow. It's going to go to 100%, make sure I don't miss anything too crucial. Of course, just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm doing it relatively sloppy and kind of fast. We're quite lucky with these rocks. They tend to blend in quite nicely. It's not finished though, because as you can see, the horizon line does not match. So one of the first things you need to actually do is to match your horizon line with the original image. So I'm going to bring down the opacity. I'm going to press Shift and the up arrow key. Zoom in a little bit here. And that is pretty close, I think. There you go. Yeah, there we go. And that's it, really. That is as easy as it gets. So you've got your 24mm at the top, and if I hide that, you can see that's the original 16mm shot, and if I bring it back, that's the 24mm shot on top. So it's just bringing that background a little bit closer. It kind of counters the 16mm distortion that you get, because on a 16mm, the way I shot this on the 16mm is that it, you know, your background tends to be quite small. It's far away in the distance, and the mountains don't have any emphasis. When I was actually there in real life, this is more what it felt like at the end of the day, and definitely not this. Those clips were definitely not that small in real life. Of course, there is a fine balance. Well, I believe there's a fine balance with these, because you can go to the extreme. You can make these clips appear gigantic out of the photo and going to the top of the frame, and that's, for me, it's taking it too far. So there needs to be a delicate balance when applying focal or perspective blending. Your aim of the game is to make this as true to life as possible. That, I believe, is why this technique exists, is to counter that whole thing of wide-angle lenses and distortion it creates with your background on specifically landscape images. Now you've got your 2 images, you can now go ahead and do your color grading again. You can actually bring this back into Adobe Camera Raw if you need to, by just simply double clicking on the smart object layer, and you can do your color grading, your masking in there as well if you want to, or you can now go and do it all in Photoshop if you want to as well. The choice is yours. I hope you found that helpful. I hope you're going to try it out as well and see for yourself if it works or not. And if you have, of course, any questions, drop it down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this technique and whether you've tried it out yourself. Great, so there you have it. Thank you very much for tuning in, and hope you found this video useful. As always, give it a like, helps to support my channel, and drop a comment down below. Let me know what you thought, and if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe and the bell button to get notified when I post new videos. I'll see you on the next one.